Hey, welcome to dotnetFlix. Today we have Jonathan,
Hi.
and I guess you're going to talk about Blazor, right?
Yep, Blazor.
It's all the rage right now, so
It's all the rage, yes, definitely.
show us what it's all about.
Alright, so yeah, Blazor is a whole new framework for building applications, and it's pretty cool. I'm gonna today just show you what it is, how it works, and how you can build real simple apps with it. And then I'm gonna wrap up and show you how to get started.
Cool. Okay, and so a simple app because it's preview, alpha.
It's very experimental right now. It's
a nice banner.
Yeah, there's a really nice banner up on the top on the website. It's I definitely wouldn't recommend building production applications with it just yet. Yeah,
Okay. Well,
it's a shame.
You can do
see
it.
you later then.
All right, but yeah, it's really cool, but it's highly experimental right now. So I wouldn't use it for production just yet.
So are we talking client-side apps, server-side apps? What kind of apps can I build with this?
Well, basically you can build like single-page applications.
Okay.
We've been doing with Angular and Aurelia, that kind of stuff. Silverlight, yeah, stuff like that. It's gonna be something like that, but it's gonna be built on .NET and C#.
Cool.
And what's interesting is like we've had this attempt to build C# .NET applications in the browser before. You know, we all know Silverlight, which probably why the L is in the name as well. I'm not sure. Might be a reference to that, but. Yeah, so the real difference here though is that it runs natively in the browser. It's using something called WebAssembly, which is a new technology that most browsers support these days, which basically allows you to run like an assembly level language on top of it. So
And that's not a Microsoft thing, right?
it's a browser thing. So Chrome implemented it. So I think Firefox does as well. I'm not sure if Edge does it yet. I think so, but yeah, it's relatively new. So that's why you shouldn't build production applications with it just yet. But it's promising from what I've seen so far, and it's so we're actually running C# and .NET natively in the browser. We don't need any plugins or any kind of stuff like that.
So there's nothing to download for a user?
No, you just go to a website and it boots up and it's gonna run on in your browser. So that's pretty cool.
Let's dive in. Pretty curious.
All right, so I've opened the website just to show you around a bit. It's blazor.net, which well, it says experimental here, right? So
Big disclaimer.
Big disclaimer, yeah, exactly. And there's a really nice getting started guide here. So there's a couple of things, if you want to get started with Blazor, there's a couple of things you need. So you need the .NET Core SDK 2.1. I actually have 2.2 on my machine, so we'll see how that works. It's preview, so we're living on the edge. You can do with Visual Studio, or you can use Visual Studio Code as well, if you're into that. That's what I'm going to use for today.
And to set the stage for me to understand, Blazor is a Microsoft thing that uses WebAssembly to let you run .NET in the browser.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I understand that correctly.
And you'll need an extension for Visual Studio to make it familiar with the Blazor syntax. It's a little bit different than what we're used to, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Cool. So if you want to do command line in Visual Studio Code, you can install the Blazor templates for .NET New. Like .NET New has been around for a while now. You can install additional templates for it using this command .NET New -I Microsoft ASP.NET Core Blazor templates. And then once you have that installed, you can create new Blazor apps. So I've actually opened up a shell here, and if I type .NET New.
Oh wow, your cursor is making stars.
It's awesome. So as you can see here, I'm not sure where my mouse is right now. It should be here. You can see a couple of Blazor related templates here. There's a couple of different ways you can actually start using Blazor. There is a way to run it standalone, which is the Blazor standalone template here.
Makes sense.
And what that does is you create a bunch of static files that you can upload to any static file web server, like, I don't know, Nginx or Apache or whatever, IIS, you know. And then you give it to a browser and it will just run.
Okay.
Then there's the hosted in an ASP.NET Core server. So if you have a ASP.NET backend, like a web API stuff, you can actually use that and then host a Blazor app on top of that.
Right.
So it's just the same app, but it's hosted in an ASP.NET server rather than hosting it in IIS or something like that. Yep. There's also a Blazor library. So you can create reusable UI as a library, and then you can use that across different projects or something like that. So it's basically just a class library, really.
Nice.
But with some additional things, so you can do UI as well. And then finally there's the, and this is really experimental, I would say, which is the server side part. So basically what that means is that your logic runs on the server rather than on the client.
Okay.
And then through the use of SignalR, you can actually do updates to the DOM tree in the browser. And those updates are coming through that SignalR connection.
Nice. Cool.
So that's really experimental right now. I haven't actually tried it myself, and it introduces some latency as well, so you need to be aware of that. But there's trade-offs to be made there. So let's just do a real quick demo of a standalone application. So I'm going to try do .NET New Blazor, and I'm going to give it a name.
dotnetFlix rules.
dotnetFlix rules. All right.
Wow.
So this, if you've done any .NET Core development, this shouldn't be really new to you. So let's go dive into that. Now the interesting thing is, where did it go? Ah, there it is. And let's open it up with Visual Studio Code just to have a quick look around on what's inside there. So we start with a program CS, which is, it looks really similar to what you would see if you build a ASP.NET Core application.
Yep.
The only real difference is we're using the Blazor WebAssembly host rather than the web host that you're used to. But that's pretty much it. There's a startup here as well, which is like the startup we know from ASP.NET Core. You have the configure services where you can do dependency injection and all that kind of stuff. And then in configure you just basically say how do you want to start your application. And rather than saying use this middleware piece, right? You're actually saying use this component, and a component is basically, well, in this case it's the whole app, but you can build small tiny components and you can combine them together to create apps.
Nice.
There's also a CS project here, of course. Nothing out of the ordinary here. It's a .NET Standard 2 target framework. There is a couple of things here to make it run. So there's, rather than just running .NET Run, it will you can do .NET Run, but then it will actually do .NET Blazor Serve. That's what's configured here. As well as the Blazor components. So you actually, as you can see, these are 0 points, so highly experimental. But yeah, this is actually what brings in Blazor into your app.
Yeah.
And then we have an app HTML. This is just temporary. This should go away at some point in the future when they figure things out. You just know you have to have this right now. And then under here we have a .root, and there's index HTML. And this is just a really simple index page. This is actually what you're gonna serve up to the user. And then in here it just boots up Blazor WebAssembly, and we'll dive into how that works in a second. You can do CSS and all that kind of stuff. There's even some JSON blob data here that we can actually fetch from our client-side application. We'll see that in a minute. Now, of course, the real interesting things are here in the pages. So I have an index CS HTML. This is just Razor syntax that we know and love from ASP.NET Core. Nothing fancy going on here. And you'll see that we're using this survey prompt component here. So this is actually a component. We go here to shared, and there's the survey prompt component here. So basically what happens at runtime is that that survey prompt element is replaced with what's here. And the behavior is attached as well. And you can see here that it actually takes a parameter, which is an attribute in the HTML. And then you just, you can pass additional data to that component and you can do different things. So that's basically how that works. Then there's the fetch data the component as well. This actually loads data up from the server, which is that weather JSON data file here. So if you look here at the functions block, this is actually where you program your logic, and you can write your code to make it actually do something. And in here you can actually see we're doing HTTP, which is up at the top here. We're actually injecting an HTTP client, which is the HTTP client we know and love from .NET. And we can just do get JSON async, and it will just go fetch that data, and we'll get back an object.
Cool.
Nice. The data. So this is really similar. If you've done any .NET development, this should all make sense.
Now, when you were showing the templates with .NET New, there was this Blazor library template, and you would use that template to package these kind of components?
Yeah, you can build the components inside that library, and then you can reuse them across different applications if you want, which is really nice as well.
Composite UI-like stuff. So.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have generic UI you want to have across multiple applications, you can do that in a library, and then you can reuse it. Nice. So let's just quickly run this and see what happens. So I'm just typing .NET run, and it will compile my application, and we'll boot up a Kestrel server to host my application. Like what I said at the start, there's different ways you can run it, but for development this is just fine because you need some server to run it on. You don't usually have Nginx installed on your machine, so but I can actually take the output of this application, deploy it to Nginx, and then it will run there as well.
Cool. And your browser have no idea. It just it gets the CSHTML file, it starts rendering it, and then it also downloads the assembly stuff, and then it starts running it on WebAssembly, right?
So this is the application. If you've done any of the single-page application templates for ASP.NET Core, like with Angular or React, those are really similar to this, except we're now running .NET and C# in the browser here. You don't actually see it from a user perspective. But if we just open up the Chrome developer tools here.
And that's the idea, right? You don't need to see it as a user.
Exactly. And I'm just gonna
it's pretty cool.
refresh the page, and we'll see what happens. And as you can see here, it's downloading a couple of CSS files. There's a JavaScript file here. But the most important thing is this. It's actually downloading DLLs, like real DLLs, and it's just running them in my browser. Like when I first saw it, I was like, how does that work? Right, that's pretty cool. Now, what's also interesting is there's this Mono.js. And Mono is actually what the runtime you're using. You're not using the .NET Core runtime we know from ASP.NET Core, but you're actually running Mono in the browser. And I'm not sure if that's going to be eventually going to become the .NET Core runtime or not. I think the reason they chose Mono is because it's already optimized to run like desktop or client-side applications. Like it's being used in Xamarin, for example, as well. So I think it makes sense from that perspective to use Mono as the runtime here. And it actually, like the runtime is actually emitting WebAssembly rather than emitting like a native assembly you would run on x86 processors. So that's the real difference here. So it's actually built on top of Mono rather than on the .NET runtime. Now, if we look here through the app, we can see there's this counter component here, and there's a button here, and when I click it, it actually updates the current count. So let's just have a look at the code behind that and see what's happening
logic,
there.
man.
Yeah, it's really impressive logic.
What a demo.
Yeah, that's the most awesome demo, right? So, so this is actually the counter component, and as you can see here, it's just it has the header here, and then we have the current count, and it actually says add current count, which references the attribute at the bottom here. And then we have a button and the onClick handler, which is just, you know, HTML JavaScript handlers you would normally write. But rather than writing a JavaScript function here, which obviously you can do, you would actually reference a method inside the functions block at the bottom here. Now there's a couple of squigglies here, as you can see. That's just because it's, you know, it's alpha or highly experimental, so all that stuff is not quite there yet. But actually, what we're actually doing here is we're incrementing the current count. So what happens now is when I run this, it will render this UI, and then when I click on the button, this method will run. That will increment this variable, and then this section of this component will get updated. So this actually generates a new DOM tree, but an in-memory DOM tree, not the actual DOM tree you see in the browser. And what happens then is that once it has compiled that DOM tree, it will actually apply the differences between the previous one and the current one to the actual DOM tree. So that's why it's fairly high performance as well.
And that basically gives you two-way data binding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what's actually happening here is it's building in-memory DOM trees and then applying the differences to the actual DOM tree you're actually seeing.
Cool.
We looked at the fetch data thingy before. So this is actually the weather data that's coming from the JSON file. So we have the.
And if you change something in the file, does the weather actually change, or is that not implemented yet?
Well, the weather won't actually change, but yeah, that's a feature we're working on. But no, that's not gonna happen. But we can change the data, and we'll see that. But if we look at here, at our network tab, it's actually fetching the weather JSON here. Yeah. So it's actually using the native browser APIs to fetch that data, even though we're using HTTP client in our code. Yeah. So what happened there is like the HTTP client has this extensibility model, which is an HTTP client handler, I think it's called. So they plugged in an HTTP client handler specifically for Blazor, so that it will actually use the underlying native browser APIs to actually fetch that data. So it also integrates with all the security features that browsers have and in regards to where you can fetch data from and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So before we start this, I actually made a bit more interesting demo.
We'll be the judge of that. Run it.
All right. So let's just run and see what happens here. So what I've done, I've implemented kind of a to-do task list, which is a really useful demo. Let's see if it will run. So one of the things I've did here as well is I've used that counter component that we saw before, and I've parameterized it.
Cool.
So if we look at the counter itself, which is still the thing you see here, like the counter here on the left. That's actually what the code we're looking at now, and we have a parameter here, and we defaulted to 1. And we use this as the increment amount. So how much do we increment when we click the button, right? So we're using that variable here to increment it. Now I've used that component on the index page, like this. Nice. And I'm setting the increment amount to 10. So this is just this is working like it did before. But when I go to home, I'm actually seeing the same thing. And if I click it here, it will actually use 10 as the increment amount. Yeah, so that's how you can parameterize components and make them reusable within your application. And then let's have a look at that to-do list. So this is my to-do component, and I just created a class called to-do item, which is down at the bottom here, which has a title and just a boolean whether it's done or not. And in here I have a list of those items, and I have a string which allows me to add new tasks to the list. So there's a small input here, sorry, this one, that allows me to enter the title for my task, and there's a checkbox here as well, which is bound to the is done property on the to do item. And then I have an add to do function here, which checks if there's a value entered. If there is, we will add a new item to the list.
Yep, makes sense.
And in here we're just doing a for each loop over the to-dos, and we're generating a list item for each one of them. And then at the top here we're using link syntax, like this is just link, we've used that before. So we're actually saying we're just counting all the to-dos that are actually that haven't been done yet, right? So this is just link working in the browser. So let's see how that looks in practice. If we go here to to-do, I can add some stuff here. Right, and just adds it to the list. Yeah, it's really awesome. And we can add more items. And as you can see here, the counter is incrementing as well. Right, and now when I click the little checkbox here, it will actually mark this one as to do, and this one actually updates in real time as well. Nice. Without having to write any code really. Yeah. So it will just update the UI as I go about it. So yeah, that's basically how Blazor works. It's just you write CSHTML, you write a bunch of HTML, and then on the bottom you add a functions block, and you can write your code there. Nice. And then it will just update the DOM tree as you go about changing things. And well, as I said, it's really experimental right now. Like debugging, that's a bit weird right now. There is a way to do it. But I haven't gotten it to work yet. Okay. So I think they've actually rehosted the Chrome developer tools inside of Blazor, so you can press a key combination, it will pop up, but it's not the same key combination you would normally use in Chrome. Okay. So because it's all experimental, right? So nobody has ever done this before. So it's really new. So the debugging experience has quite a bit of length to go before that you can actually use it. And I think the team hasn't actually decided if they're gonna do this as a product at all. Like they're experimenting with it. From what I've seen, it's usable and it works. But there's a lot of rough edges that they will need to work out in the team as well.
So a lot of potential, a lot of challenges left to get this.
Yeah, exactly. So to get this to a point where you can, safely build apps with it, that's gonna take some time.
And if I run .NET in my browser on the WebAssembly part, the first thing that pops up for me is, okay, what can I do? Can I get to the local file system? Can I do stuff that could harm my computer? Is there?
Well, actually, it implements .NET Standard 2.0, so all the APIs from .NET Standard 2.0 are available, but there are quite a few of them that will just throw platform not supported exception, right?
So it's really sandbox still.
So
which
like
is
you're
a good
running,
thing.
exactly. You're running inside the browser, and all the sandboxing your browser does is still in effect when you're using WebAssembly. So.
But generally, I can also use any NuGet package that targets .NET Standard 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a .NET Standard library that targets 2.0, you can just run it in Blazor and it will just work.
Cool.
Unless you're using APIs that are not supported. Like there's a couple of APIs that deal with file system and all that kind of stuff, and they will just blow up at runtime.
This is reassuring.
Yeah, definitely. So. I would basically encourage people to try it out. It's I think it's really cool tech.
So Blazor.net, and then from there on.
There's some real great documentation to get you started.
Nice.
Like building your first app, and it will go through like, okay, I'm going to create a new project. It will basically what I showed you today as well. And then how you can build components, what are the key things there. There's really good documentation on here. Nice. And then you can dive in a little deeper as well, like how does dependency injection work, although it's really similar to how it works in ASP.NET Core.
Yeah.
But if you've never done ASP.NET, definitely go through those sections as well.
Nice. This is cool tech, man.
Yeah. And one thing I forgot to mention, there's also a way to interrupt with JavaScript running in the browser, so you can actually run JavaScript functions from inside your Blazor app if you've loaded the JavaScript.
You can also do some hybrid stuff that you say, I have some computational intensive stuff that I do on WebAssembly, and the other stuff is just my single page application. Yeah,
you could do that. You can mix and match things and combine them together.
Maybe you've got an existing JavaScript library or npm package or something like that you want to use.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do that. And if you look at the interface for that, it's really similar to how that would work in Silverlight. Okay. So if you've done any Silverlight, I'm doing it. I'm still doing it. I know. And one other thing is they're also experimenting with using this inside of an Electron host. Oh yeah. So Electron is a platform built by GitHub, I think. I'm not sure, but they build a platform to run native applications as like a browser shell. Like Visual Studio Code runs on Electron, and there's a whole bunch of tools that run on it. And they've actually experimented with doing Blazor inside of an Electron host. So you can that would actually allow you to do cross-platform UI with .NET. So that would be pretty cool if they ever get to a point that you can actually run that. So
nice. Thanks, man.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm gonna play with this probably.
Awesome.
Nothing more than playing with it because we need to make sure that it will be production ready.
Yeah, it will crash on you.
Yeah,
it will definitely crash on you. Yeah.
So if you guys like this, please subscribe to our .NETFlix channel on YouTube, and if you like Blazor, go to blazor.net and start experimenting with this. Thanks, Jonathan, and see you next time. Later.
Bye bye.